She walked in with nothing but a tired smile, no cameras, no entourage, just a woman trying to enjoy a quiet meal. But what happened next? No one could have predicted, because when the restaurant manager approached Susie Wiles and told her to leave, not even he could imagine the storm that would follow. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a moment that exposed something far deeper. And what Susie did next? Well, it would leave everyone speechless. It was a late autumn evening in Charleston, South Carolina. The streets were glazed with a light drizzle, the kind that made the air smell earthy and nostalgic. Susie Wiles, a political strategist known in Washington circles but mostly unrecognized by the general public, had flown in for a brief, off-the-record meeting with local campaign volunteers. After hours of discussion in a cramped conference room, all she wanted was a moment of peace, a warm meal, and a quiet corner to collect her thoughts. Not the spotlight, not attention, just stillness. She walked into Willow's Table, a small family-owned restaurant she'd read about online. Rustic wooden interiors, dim candlelight, and the aroma of freshly baked cornbread. It was the kind of place that felt like home to anyone walking in off the street. She took a seat by the window, gently setting down her coat and umbrella, and ordered a pot of tea in the house's special, rosemary grilled chicken with garlic mashed potatoes. She smiled softly at the waitress, trying not to look too worn out from the day. But somewhere in the background, someone else was watching her. Behind the counter, the restaurant manager, Mark Callahan, had been watching since the moment Susie walked in. He hadn't recognized her at first glance, but when she placed her order, a staff member approached him quietly and whispered something that changed the air in the room. "That's Susie Wiles," they said, "the political consultant." Mark's expression shifted. He had opinions about politics, strong ones, and he didn't shy away from showing them. He wasn't interested in which side she was on. To him, they were all the same. Manipulators, spinners, elitists detached from the struggles of real people. And now one of them was sitting in his restaurant. His jaw tightened. It wasn't about the person, it was about the principle. Or at least that's what he told himself. Mark wiped his hands on a towel, straightened his apron, and walked toward Susie's table. She looked up politely as he approached, assuming he might be the owner checking on her comfort. "Ma'am," he said stiffly, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Susie blinked. "I'm sorry? This establishment reserves the right to deny service to anyone. I'm exercising that right tonight." The room grew quieter. A few heads turned. The waitress who had just served Susie paused halfway to another table, visibly confused. "I haven't done anything wrong," Susie said gently. "You haven't," Mark replied, "but your presence here, it's not welcome." There was no shouting, no anger, just a tense, quiet sting in the words that hung between them. Glimpses of the past, Susie's inner reflection. Susie sat still for a moment, her mind quietly racing. She wasn't a stranger to confrontation. In campaign rooms, strategy sessions, and interviews, she'd handled tougher scenes. But this wasn't political. It was personal. It was humiliating. And yet as she sat there, her eyes wandered toward the waitress, who looked ashamed, toward the couple in the corner who avoided eye contact, toward the young man who whispered into his girlfriend's ear, perhaps too loudly, "That's what you get when you play politics." She remembered her father's voice, calm, warm, reminding her when she was a teenager. "When people push you to fall, stand taller. But don't shout louder. Just stand taller." She stood up slowly. Susie looked Mark in the eye. "I respect your decision," she said softly. "I just hope you understand what it means." Then she reached into her coat pocket, pulled out her wallet, and placed a $100 bill on the table. "This was going to be for my dinner," she said, "but I'd rather it go toward the next customer who walks in hungry." She turned to the waitress and handed her another bill. "You've been kind. Don't let the world make you bitter." And with that, she walked out. The door closed behind her with a soft chime, but inside the restaurant the silence was deafening. Mark stood frozen, holding the plate of food he'd been about to discard. Around him people stared, not at Susie's politics but at her poise. And that was just the beginning. The next morning, the incident was all over social media. A customer had posted a short clip of the encounter. It had gone viral overnight. The caption read, "A woman walked out with dignity while the room sat in silence." Politics aside, that was grace. What followed was unexpected. People began digging. Who was she? Why did she get kicked out? As her name circulated, so did the story. But instead of political division, what sparked was an outpouring of reflection. Do we treat each other based on our roles or our humanity? Susie Wiles hadn't said anything inflammatory. She didn't fight back. She didn't issue a public statement, but her actions spoke louder than any speech could have. Story continues. Next update will continue from here and build emotional arc further toward transformation, societal impact, and character resolution. The story grew beyond anyone's expectations. News outlets picked it up, commentary videos flooded YouTube and TikTok, hashtags like Washo, Grace in Silence, and Dignity Speaks trended for days. And Susie, she remained quiet. No interviews, no rebuttals, no statements, just silence. And yet, her silence said more than headlines ever could. Soon, people from all walks of life began sharing their own stories. Stories of being judged for their jobs, beliefs, appearances. Stories of exclusion, quiet humiliation, and grace under pressure. The ripple had turned into a wave. At Willow's table, the atmosphere changed. People began visiting, not to boycott, not to protest, but to engage. They asked questions. They wanted to know what had really happened. Some came just to sit at the same table where Susie had been. Others brought notes, flowers, or donations in envelopes marked, "For someone who feels unseen." Mark Callahan, the manager, struggled to keep up. His inbox was overflowing. Half the town criticized him. The other half thanked him, oddly for provoking a conversation people had been avoiding for years. One day he received a letter. It was handwritten. To Mark, sometimes it takes a harsh moment to open a gentle truth. Thank you for reminding us all that how we treat people, especially when we think no one's watching, defines who we are, a citizen who believes in second chances. Mark sat for a long time holding that letter. It was unsigned. He started thinking differently. A few weeks later, the restaurant quietly added something to its menu, a small section titled The Susie Table Specials. Meals bought and paid for in advance by customers, for anyone who couldn't afford one. Mark had fought the idea at first, but something about the way the community responded, with kindness, not anger, changed him. He started greeting customers differently. He listened more, judged less. One evening, as he cleared a table, a young waitress asked, "Do you think she'll ever come back?" Months later, a quiet figure walked into Willow's table again. Same table, same window, same smile. It was Susie. Mark saw her. Their eyes met. This time he walked over with a glass of water and said only two words, "Welcome back." And she simply nodded. Thank you. There were no cameras, no crowd, just two people, changed by a moment, connected by its lesson. Because grace doesn't need a stage. And sometimes the loudest voice is the one that never shouts. Mark paused, then smiled softly. I hope so. So what do we take from this story? Not every moment needs a headline. Not every disagreement needs noise. Sometimes the most powerful revolution begins in the silence of a single act of dignity. And maybe, just maybe, the world doesn't need more outrage. It needs more grace. If this story touched you, leave a comment below. Share your thoughts. Share your grace. And don't forget, someone near you may be living an invisible struggle. Be the moment that helps them feel seen.